Chapter 15. Monday late afternoon. Doreen was a little overwhelmed, make that incredibly overwhelmed, by the time both Scott and Agatha left, both promising they would return on the next day because they hadn't brought in supplies for the paintings to be packed up properly. The moving men had cleared out the bulk of the furniture. There was a little bit of extra room, and Scott was still muttering about pieces. They hadn't planned on it being a 2-day job again, but she didn't understand how he couldn't have. Last time it had been a 2-day job, and they had picked up a lot fewer pieces. Or maybe he thought these smaller pieces were less valuable. She didn't know. It was just too crazy. Instead of getting anything accomplished like she was supposed to, including making a trip to the bank to get that cash deposited, or making a trip to see Mac for his enactment, she'd spent all day going over the house. She'd taken photos and written down notes, and paperwork had exchanged hands. She closed the front door, walked into the kitchen, and made herself that ever-lovely cup of comfort tea. She walked out to her back garden, where she collapsed onto the grass. Lying prone, stretched out to her full length in the late afternoon sun, the animals wandered all over her. Muggs looking for attention, Goliath refusing to take no for an answer and lying from her belly to her chest, and Thaddeus, who appeared to think her head should be a perch. Finally he gave up and walked up and down her arm. She groaned. Today was nuts. Good thing I had a good night's sleep because I'm feeling more than a little bit exhausted. The trouble was the money. Like big money. She knew that if she could make it to the point when all of this was sold, if any of their promises turned out to be reality, she should be fine, meaning financially secure. With a certain amount invested, she could continue to live without having to worry about getting a full-time job. She would still need to do small gardening jobs, and she was fine with that. It wouldn't be the lifestyle she had been accustomed to, but then she no longer wanted that sterile perfection that was just an illusion. She much preferred the reality of her current life. Right now, she lay full length on the grass, and that was something she'd never have been allowed to do with her husband. There would have to be lawn chairs taken out onto a little patio, and blocks laid out for her to walk on so as not to walk on the grass. Oh, the outrage if she had walked across the grass itself. There were a lot of similarities between her ex and the gardener at Rosemore, for that matter. She lay here, rubbing her tired eyes, and yet she was still so wired from everything she and the experts had discussed today, from books to furniture to paintings. Agatha was thrilled now that she'd found several of the paintings that she wanted to take back with her. There had been one in the spare room upstairs. The painting had some faint, weirdly lit picture of a little rowboat and a stream with a dock and various trees. It was kind of pretty, but it wasn't anything special, except Agatha had almost moaned in joy over it. Obviously that one was going. 2 in her bedroom were going too. She didn't know if there were more downstairs in the basement. She hadn't even had a chance to look. The garage was mostly cleaned out. Some of the furniture had been brought up from the basement and into the living room. And then there had been Clara's visit. "I'm also seriously tired," she said, yawning. Her phone rang. She groaned, picked it up, looked at it, and sighed. "Hi, Mac," she said, putting it on speakerphone and laying it on the grass beside her. "I hope you don't have anything too difficult to ask. I'm laying down outside, absolutely done." "Are they finished?" "I don't think so," she said, rubbing her eyes again. "I am though." Just then Goliath shifted on her belly. "Ump." He rolled over, stretched out a paw, and gently patted her lip with his claws. "We're all done. I'm lying on the grass. Goliath is on my chest. Muggs is lying on my shoulder, and it seems like Thaddeus is still getting comfortable. But as far as Scott and Agatha, they're coming back tomorrow." "Who's Agatha?" Mac asked. "Another specialist," she said. "And John was supposed to come, but he couldn't get the red eye he wanted apparently. So he'll be here tomorrow too." She groaned. I can't believe how much having all those people in my space has just finished me. But did they take anything? He asked in surprise. I didn't think it would take that long. It was a slow process. I think they have most of it packed up, so they shouldn't be here all day tomorrow. But I do feel bad because Clara showed up at my door today, and she's really putting way too much stock in me, Doreen said, her earlier worries reappearing. I hate that. She's hoping I can pull off a miracle, and I can't. Take it easy, he said. Nobody is expecting you to pull off a miracle, but you've had such great beginner's luck that, of course, people will hope you can get lucky again. Yes, but this is a child, and it's more recent than the other cases, she said. We also don't have any reason to suspect she's dead yet, he said. I know that's the popular opinion after such a long time, but we're also seeing a ton of reports where other kidnapped kids have been kept captive or integrated into a family. Then, when they turn 18, they finally can either escape or are released in some way. In this case, Crystal would be 18 now, Doreen said, rolling her neck and stretching out more. Goliath dumped his paw into her soft, tender lip again. She lifted his paw and put it on her neck, and immediately he stretched it back up and batted her nose. I just don't have a clue where to even start looking. There's a reason why the police haven't solved the case yet, he said humorously. I know you're making us look like absolute idiots here recently, but we do work hard at this. We have protocols we follow and trails we check right to the end. We haven't given up on this case. Nan will check at the retirement home too, she said. Why? He asked, his voice sharp. Does she know anybody who knows something? I hope so, Doreen said, because I doubt the creek or the lake has anything to offer this time. At that, he laughed. Have the animals met Clara? Yes, she said, they have. Clara suggested it was Mary, the husband's new wife, but then that's almost a standard accusation. Speaking from true life again? I try to forget that aspect of my life. Yet I was thinking about your brother not too long ago. Has he said anything to you about my case against my lawyer? I hate to bug him, as it's really not been all that long since he said he'd look into it. I know, Max said. I did talk to him the other day, and he said he's still working on it. He sounded much more positive about it, but didn't want me to give you false hopes until he had proof. Anything positive would help right now, she said, yawning again. Are you sure you slept last night? I thought so, she said, but my research has been weird. Maybe my mind was working on all that when I should have been sleeping. Lots of little girls going missing. It makes no sense that the second case with that similar footprint would have just taken the child's toys. Unless. Mac's voice trailed off. I know, unless they intended to take the child at the same time and were interrupted, or were planning to abduct the child at a later date. We did toss around the idea that maybe they were just after the toys, that maybe they had another child who needed toys, and that somehow somebody had seen these and thought they would be ideal. It would be an easy job, so why not? Nah, she said, that's too obvious. You can apparently pick up toys at secondhand stores really cheap. So what do you think is going on? I think the toys were supposed to go with the child, and for whatever reason, the child was left behind. Left behind, he asked, his tone turning curious. You mean as in a choice? She sat upright, thinking about what she just said. What if the child was chosen, and the toys were taken so the child would be more comfortable, but something happened to make them realize the child was not a good choice? Silence was heard on the other end. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, but why wouldn't they have left the toys? Maybe they took them first, maybe threw them out the window, and intended to grab the child and pick up the toys again on the other side. That's possible, he said. And what kind of scenario can you possibly envision where the child didn't fit the kidnapper's choice? All kinds of things come to mind, she said slowly, hating to even think about the term good enough, because every child was perfect as far as she was concerned. But then she was biased because she didn't have any of her own. With half a smile at her own humor, she said, "What if the child was on medicine? What if the child was sickly? What if the child was meant to be a female and potentially was living as a male?" she said cautiously. At that, Mac gave a strangled exclamation. "I can't say we came up with any theory regarding children born with ambiguous genitalia," he said. "How many times has that happened?" "Per my research. In today's day and age? More than you would expect," she said slowly. "People are choosing to let their children identify their true sex in whatever way they want. My other theory is maybe the parent was abusive, and the child could have been damaged, physically and/or mentally. Okay, I can see how some good Samaritan would want to take the child out of there and save it. In which case they'd make a second attempt. But kidnappers? Still, there was some talk about abuse with Crystal," he said quietly. "So maybe that is what happened." "Oh, now that's interesting. I didn't realize that," Doreen said, staring off at her house. "Clara is supposed to send me a list of what went missing with Crystal, and the clothes she was wearing at the time. Clara feels Crystal's stepmother wanted to get rid of Crystal, so she and Eric could have a better life without the baggage of children. You know that the two houses are across from each other, right?" "What do you mean, the two houses?" "Clara, when she moved out, moved across the road," she said. "So the houses literally face each other. This way her daughter could go back and forth and see both parents. Apparently the parents themselves were okay with that and thought it was an ideal situation, but not the new girlfriend/stepmom. They're married now." Clara said Mary wasn't a fan of kids. But Crystal was hardly a toddler, and if they were living that close, then both parents would have their freedom because the other could look after the child while one went on dates or trips or whatever. "In theory, yes," Doreen said. "Honestly, I'm so tired, none of this is making any sense." "What did the animals think of Clara?" "Muggs didn't like her," she announced suddenly. "He barked at her several times and then backed away." "Does that tell you anything?" "She was fairly aggressive at that point because she was asking me what was going on, what with me taking a walk in her neighborhood. He didn't seem to react the same way when she came to the door this morning," she said, "but then it was chaos here. We had moving men in the living room, in the dining room, in the garage. There were trucks and vehicles all over the place. I was surprised Clara stopped." "Look. You always seem to end up in trouble with this stuff," Max said. "And I know you're feeling very sympathetic toward Clara, but you can't be sure she doesn't have a hand in her daughter's disappearance." He took a deep breath. "So I hate to say this, but don't be too trusting. Let's not let Clara turn into a Penny scenario.